My boss tried to frame me for embezzlement, but I had been recording everything for months. My boss smiled and shook my hand at the company holiday party while HR was upstairs printing my termination papers. By Monday morning, I was being escorted out in handcuffs, accused of stealing $50,000 from client accounts. The police detective even apologized as he read me my rights because everyone knew I was such a good employee. What they didn't know was that I had 6 months of secret recordings that would destroy not just my boss, but half the executive team. I need to get this out because the trial starts next week, and honestly, I'm terrified no one will believe me. 3 years ago, I was living my dream job, marketing director at Pinnacle Solutions, a mid-sized consulting firm in downtown Seattle. Great salary, corner office, respect from my team. I was 29 and felt like I'd finally made it. My boss, Victoria Chen, 45, was this powerhouse executive everyone admired. She mentored me, invited me to client dinners, even helped me negotiate my last raise. The company was family-owned by the Morrison family. Old Seattle money. Richard Morrison, 62, was CEO, and his daughter Jessica, 34, ran operations. They treated employees like family, or so I thought. Christmas bonuses, company retreats, the works. My life was perfectly stable until March, when I noticed Victoria started staying late every Tuesday. She'd send the rest of us home early, claiming she needed quiet time for strategic planning. The first red flag was tiny. A client, Mrs. Patterson from Emerald Tech, called me directly instead of going through Victoria like usual. "Honey, I just want to confirm that extra $3,000 charge on last month's invoice. Victoria said it was for additional market research, but I don't remember authorizing that." I pulled the file. There was no additional research. I assumed it was a billing error and told Mrs. Patterson I'd look into it. When I asked Victoria about it, she barely looked up from her computer. "Oh, we did some preliminary competitive analysis. I handled it personally, don't worry about it." But something in her voice was off, too casual, too quick. I tried to let it go because Victoria had never given me a reason not to trust her. She'd been nothing but supportive for 3 years. Why would she lie about a billing issue? 2 weeks later, I was copying files for a presentation when I accidentally grabbed the wrong folder from Victoria's desk. Inside were bank statements. Not company accounts, personal ones. Victoria's personal checking account showed deposits that made no sense on her salary. $5,000 here, $2,800 there, all from something called VC Consulting LLC. Victoria walked in while I was staring at the statements. "What are you doing with my personal files?" "I grabbed the wrong folder. Sorry, I was just what? Going through my private financial information." Her voice was ice cold. This wasn't the Victoria who'd celebrated my promotion with champagne just 6 months ago. "No, of course not. I was looking for the Henderson presentation materials." She snatched the papers away. "Those are in the blue folder, clearly marked. Maybe you should pay closer attention." That night I couldn't sleep. VC Consulting LLC? Victoria Chen. The initials matched, but employees weren't allowed to have outside consulting businesses. It was explicitly in our contracts. I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before. Victoria's new designer handbag that probably cost more than my rent. Her strategic planning, Tuesday nights. The way she'd begun handling certain client invoices personally instead of routing them through accounting like everyone else's. The discovery that changed everything happened on a Thursday in April. I was working late when I heard voices from Victoria's office. The door was cracked, and I recognized Jessica Morrison's voice. The Patterson account worked perfectly. They never questioned the extra charges. Victoria's response made my blood freeze. "Emma almost caught it, but I shut that down. She's too trusting to be a real problem." "What about the Hendricks retainer? Can you skim another $2,000 without raising flags?" "Already done. I've got their payment processing automated through my LLC. Richard reviews the quarterly summaries, not individual invoices." I stood there in the hallway, understanding that my mentor and the CEO's daughter were stealing from clients. And they just called me too trusting while planning their next theft. That weekend, I bought a digital recorder. For the next 3 months, I recorded everything. Not just the Tuesday night meetings, but phone calls, casual conversations, even client calls when Victoria put them on speaker. What I learned was worse than simple theft. Victoria and Jessica had created an entire shadow billing system. Fake consulting fees, inflated project costs, phantom research charges. They'd been running this scam for over 2 years, stealing roughly $3,000,500 per month from different clients, small enough that most never noticed. But the real shock was discovering who else was involved. On one recording from June, I heard Richard Morrison's voice clearly. "Jessica, the quarterly skim seems light this quarter. Are we having collection issues?" "No, Dad. Victoria's been careful to keep individual amounts low. We're actually up 8% from last year." Richard Morrison wasn't a victim. He was the ringleader. A family that treated employees like family was systematically robbing their own clients and had been for years. By July, I had over 40 hours of recordings. Detailed conversations about which clients to target, how to disguise the charges, even discussions about expanding the operation. I was sitting on enough evidence to destroy them all, but I was paralyzed. These weren't just my employers. Victoria had written recommendation letters for me. Jessica had invited me to her wedding. How could I have been so blind? The answer came in August, during a conversation I recorded by accident. Jessica's voice was crystal clear. Emma's getting too curious about client billing. She asked accounting about invoice approvals yesterday. Victoria responded, "We might need a distraction, something to discredit her if she gets too close." What kind of distraction? She has access to client accounts. Would be terrible if money went missing, and the evidence pointed to her. My hands were shaking so hard, I nearly dropped the recorder. They were planning to frame me. I wish I could say I immediately went to the police, but I was terrified. These people had money, connections, and now a plan to destroy me. Who would believe a 29-year-old employee over 3 respected executives with decades in the business? I decided to document everything even more carefully. If they were going to frame me, I needed ironclad proof of my innocence. In September, Victoria started asking me to handle special client payments that bypassed our normal accounting procedures. She claimed it was for high-priority clients who needed discretionary service arrangements. Now I knew this was the setup. Every time Victoria asked me to process one of these payments, I'd record our conversation and document exactly what she told me to do. I was creating a paper trail that showed I was following direct orders from my supervisor, not acting independently. The frame-up began in October. Victoria called me into her office on a Wednesday morning. "Emma, we've had some concerns raised about irregular client billing. HR needs to review your access to payment processing systems." My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. "What kind of concerns?" "Some invoices don't match the services documented in project files. Since you've been handling the special client payments, we need to make sure everything is properly recorded." She was so good at this. Concerned but supportive boss, just trying to clear up a misunderstanding. Of course, I've got records of everything. When you asked me to process those payments, I kept detailed notes. Something flickered in Victoria's eyes. "What kind of notes?" "Times, dates, amounts, the instructions you gave me for each transaction." "Emma, I think you might be confused. I never gave you specific instructions on individual payments. That would be inappropriate. I simply granted you access and trusted your judgment." I stared at her. She was rewriting history to my face. "Victoria, that's not what happened. You told me exactly how to process each payment. You said they were for discretionary services." "I think you should be very careful about your recollections, Emma. HR is already reviewing irregularities. If you start making claims about conversations that didn't happen the way you remember, it might suggest you're trying to shift responsibility." That's when I knew I was completely on my own. The next week, Victoria started excluding me from client meetings I'd normally attend. When I asked about it, she said the clients had requested different representation, but wouldn't elaborate. Jessica Morrison stopped making eye contact with me in the hallways. By November, I was being systematically isolated from anything important. Victoria reassigned my major projects to other team members, claiming she wanted to reduce my workload during the billing review. I was being erased from the company before they destroyed me. The setup accelerated in December. Victoria asked me to process a $15,000 payment for consulting services for our biggest client, Meridian Industries. She handed me a printed invoice and told me to handle it immediately. The invoice looked wrong. The formatting was slightly different from our usual templates, and the service description was vague. But when I questioned it, Victoria got impatient. "Emma, Meridian is our most important client. They need this process today for their year-end books. Are you going to handle it, or do I need to find someone more reliable?" I processed the payment, but I also photographed the invoice and recorded our entire conversation. 3 days later, Meridian's CFO called Victoria directly. I was in her office when the call came in, and Victoria put it on speaker without realizing what was coming. "Victoria, we've got a problem. Our year-end audit found a $15,000 payment to Pinnacle that we never authorized. It's not in any of our service agreements." Victoria's face went white, but her voice stayed calm. "That's strange, Mr. Rodriguez. Let me look into our records and get back to you." After she hung up, Victoria stared at me for a long moment. "Emma, didn't you verify that Meridian payment with their accounting department before processing? You told me it was urgent and pre-approved. You said they needed it for their year-end books." "I never said it was pre-approved. I said to handle the standard verification process. This is a serious mistake." She was doing it again, rewriting our conversation in real time. But this time, I had it recorded. The company holiday party was on December 15th. Victoria gave a speech about trust, integrity, and the Pinnacle family values. She even mentioned me specifically, thanking me for my dedicated service and saying how much she'd enjoyed mentoring me. I smiled and applauded with everyone else. knowing that 6 floors above us, HR Director Tom Walsh was working late on my termination paperwork. I knew because I'd recorded Tom's phone call with Victoria that afternoon. We'll terminate her Friday morning and immediately freeze her system access. The police will be here by 10 a.m. with a warrant for the Meridian theft. What about the other irregularities we documented? Once they start investigating, they'll find the pattern. The Henderson account, Patterson, all of them, she's been stealing for months. Monday morning, I arrived at work with a small recording device in my jacket pocket and a backup drive hidden in my car. Victoria was waiting in my office with Tom Walsh and 2 Seattle police detectives. "Emma, please sit down. These officers need to ask you some questions about irregular client payments." Detective Morrison, no relation to the family, ironically, was professional but firm. "Ms. Chen has provided evidence of unauthorized payments totaling approximately $50,000 over the past 6 months. We have a warrant to search your workspace and arrest you on charges of embezzlement." I looked at Victoria. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Before you arrest me, can I ask Victoria one question?" Detective Morrison nodded. "Victoria, do you remember our conversation on December 12th about the Meridian payment, when you told me it was urgent and pre-approved?" "Emma, I never said it was pre-approved. I told you to follow standard procedures." I reached into my jacket pocket. "Detective Morrison, I'd like to provide evidence that might be relevant to your investigation." I placed the digital recorder on my desk. This device contains recordings of my conversations with Victoria Chen, Jessica Morrison, and Richard Morrison over the past 6 months, including detailed discussions of their systematic theft from client accounts and their plan to frame me for the crimes they committed. The silence in that room was deafening. Victoria finally spoke. "Emma, recording private conversations without consent is illegal in Washington state." Actually, Washington is a 2-party consent state for private conversations, but these recordings were made in our workplace during business discussions about company matters. I checked with a lawyer. Detective Morrison looked interested. "Ms. Thompson, are you willing to provide these recordings as evidence?" "I have 6 months of documentation. 47 hours of audio, including detailed discussions of how they targeted specific clients, created fake invoices, and planned to pin it on me when they got caught." Tom Walsh spoke up. "This is ridiculous. Victoria Chen is a respected executive with no history of financial irregularities." I looked straight at Victoria. "Should I play the recording from June 23rd, where you and Jessica discuss expanding the theft to international clients? Or maybe August 15th, where you told Jessica I was getting too curious and needed to be discredited?" Victoria's face crumbled. The next 6 hours were a blur. Police interviews, lawyers, more detectives. My recordings were handed over as evidence, and by evening, Victoria Chen, Jessica Morrison, and Richard Morrison were all in custody. The company folded within 2 months. Turns out, when your entire executive team is arrested for embezzlement, clients tend to take their business elsewhere. I was cleared of all charges and received a settlement from the company's insurance policy for wrongful termination and false accusation. It wasn't enough to make up for the months of stress, but it was something. The trial started last week. Victoria's lawyer tried to argue that I had manipulated the recordings, but digital forensic analysis proved they were authentic and unaltered. Richard Morrison took a plea deal and will serve 18 months. Jessica got 2 years. Victoria, who the prosecutor called the architect of the scheme, is looking at 5 to 7 years. Yesterday, Victoria's lawyer approached me in the courthouse hallway. She wanted me to know that Victoria was deeply sorry and hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive her. I looked at this woman who had mentored me, supported me, and then systematically planned to destroy my life to cover her own crimes. Tell Victoria that trust, once broken, can never be repaired, but recording devices don't lie.